Hi, everyone. It's Cheryl Hickerson of Females and Finance. And I am so excited today to be talking about something that it's not talked about enough. And it seems like nobody has enough information on it except for the friends that we've brought on today. I'm going to have them do some self introductions because their greatness is far too wide and reaching to list everything here on this webinar. But I want to start off with a couple of things that I start every Females in Finance meeting with. If you've never, been on one, number one, if you're watching here live on Zoom, you do not have to have your camera on. If I want everybody's mental health to be in a good spot, and if turning it off makes you feel like you're, in a better space, do it. I want you to do what's good for you. Second, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I will field them to Joy and Paul or myself if you have one for me. But if you also don't feel like being called on or talked to, also feel free to send me a chat and say, here, I'm just not feeling it today, Cheryl. I just want to be here and be a part of everything, but don't want to talk. And I totally respect that too. We're really big on mental health at Females in Finance. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to let Joy and Paul sort of self-describe their greatness to you. And then we're going to get into some of the questions about working with LGBTQ planning and a few other things. That the gamut's kind of wide today, but you'll see where we're going. So Joy, tell everybody about your greatness.
Okay, thank you. I am the author of Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old and the Complete Elder Care Planner. And exciting news, drumroll, the fourth edition of this book is coming out and it's already made available and it'll be out October this year. And there is a ton of information in this book about the LGBTQ plus community and caregiving in the community, which is never talked about. So that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Love it. Love it. Paul.
So my name is Paul Nagle. I'm the founding executive director of Stonewall Community Development Corporation. Our mission is to see New York City's older adult LGBTQ, New York City's LGBTQ older adults in safe, welcoming housing they can afford with access to health and mental health services that meet their unique needs. We serve everyone in the city, but by centering LGBTQ folks in the planning and piloting of these projects, we are ensuring that our needs will be met. That's basically it.
Love it. As we get started, a couple of things. When we're talking about longevity planning, oftentimes those talks are very geared towards a more a traditional family set, a man and a woman, married couples. There tends to be a, caregiving quality to this always. I always tell people, raise your hand. Do you know somebody who's been in a nursing home or has had, it's everybody, right? But far too often it's so geared towards one group of people and never spoken about in other groups of people. And I think that is such a disservice to communities far and wide, because families today look very different. And they've always actually been different, but we're just more available to see now. And I think that we're not having discussion around this. November tends to be, especially in the insurance or risk management world, is long-term care planning month. It's caregivers month. But if you look at all of the ads and you watch me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, those ads are going to pop up with a husband, wife, they probably have children, because, nobody ever doesn't have children, right? They're always off on the beach running down. And, I just had knee surgery. I'm 52. I don't know who these runners on the beach are, but I'm really jealous of them. And so we need to start debunking these things and start talking about real life and what that looks like. And this is why I asked Joy, who introduced me to Paul, and had Paul here to talk about some of the topics. So we want you to be very open to asking questions. This is your moment. Like, this is me giving you the sign that says, ask everything, because we believe at Females in Finance that an unasked question is the only wrong question. We really need to start being out there. And if you don't know the right terms, it's okay. We're not here to judge. We are here to make certain that we are serving people far and wide as much as possible. So the first thing I want to jump into with that is, Paul, I would like to talk with you about sort of describing the needs of the LGBTQ community when it comes, especially to Alzheimer's. And And maybe talk about some of the, your organization's initiatives and what that looks like so that people know what to look like for their local communities as well.
Thanks. And I'm always happy to talk to folks who are in finance because I think we are presenting an incredible opportunity. So our sort of fundamental tenets are data-driven and community-based. So the situation is we have an LGBTQ older adult community with a shared lived experience of fighting oppression, which is unfortunately front and center once again. We have a history of building networks of care and support for ourselves, like we did with the AIDS crisis when no one else will. We have creativity, we have resilience, and we have a whole lot of baby boomers who have no one to caregive for them and no one to leave their appreciated real estate assets to. We see that as a great formula. So we're developing several projects that are interrelated. The community properties portfolio is either through bequest or acquisition. We're building a portfolio of properties that we will own and hold in deeded perpetual affordability and operate and manage as a central system so that we can achieve all of those economies of scale and service. And then the Stonewall Bridge is really a way to create a mechanism for LGBTQ folks to participate in that great wealth transfer of 70 trillion that's happening between boomers and their kids. So we're trying to create a similar system for the LGBTQ community to create legacy. So the idea of that is that folks can bequest their house to us. They can get a tax annuity for it while they're still living there. They can access our care, which is extremely LGBTQ competent, and it's combined with a workforce development program that trains younger LGBTQ folks with no career paths or paths to equity to become awesome home care attendants, work for us at higher than the regular rate, and if they stay with us long enough, be able to vest shares in the equity that the community property portfolio is generating.
So when we say LGBTQ plus caregiver, I just want to be clear. I could be an LGBTQ plus caregiver by being a caregiver to someone who is LGBTQ plus. So it isn't the caregiver is necessarily in the population, but we as straight people need to know what the needs are of the people we love who are LGBTQ plus. That's a huge distinction. And then it opens up the whole argument and the whole challenge and the whole insight as to, should I be listening to this? I'm not an LGBTQ caregiver. And I say, oh, yes, you are. You are if a family member is in need of your attention. Or what if you have a family member you don't even know is LGBTQ plus and they come out later on? You see, I think that everybody as a potential caregiver needs to know about these discussions and these resources that Paul is talking about.
And Paul, can I ask a question about what Joy just said with your organization specifically? Did I hear you right? You train people in those particulars of things too through your organization to be.
We will be. It's that's development now. Basically, the way we've created this, we started in 2014 in response to the murder of our friend Eleanor Cooper, who was a fairly famous lesbian activist. She founded the Coalition for Lesbian and Gay Rights, which got all the gay groups to stop fighting and finally get the gay rights bill passed in New York City. She had had a stroke. She was in a wheelchair and she had been couch surfing at a lot of the founding board members' homes. She ended up in a nursing home, and over the course of several nights, her partner, Jay Callio, came in one night and found an aide assaulting her vagina. And apparently it had been going on for several nights and she hadn't been able to communicate it. And she had a bed sore that spread into the assault area and she died, and nothing ever happened to the aide. And that was the organizing impetus for our group. So we started with no deep pockets, which I don't recommend, just a bunch of activists. But Jay Callio, her partner, also died prematurely because he hadn't transitioned yet. He was a trans male, and he had the double BRCA gene, so he was going to need to eventually have both breasts removed. But the doctor accused him of trying to use the the scheduled surgery to get a top surgery, and canceled the surgery, and he was never able to reschedule before it metastasized, and he died quite young as well. So we're really clear about what the challenges are, and there are some challenges with the population anyway. LGBTQ folks tend not to want to have people in their homes that they don't know, because the aging services is so dominated by religious institutions. We have one woman who the aide woke her up at like 4:00 in the morning of her surgery and said, "Pray with me so you can survive your surgery, renounce your being a lesbian." I mean, that kind of trauma is pretty constant, and almost everybody has stories like that. So yeah, the more we can train folks to understand the particulars of LGBT, and the thing is, people forget that we live in fairly small worlds. We have one woman who, back in the 50s, if you were a lesbian, executive in a company, you were always easy prey for any other woman who wanted to take your job. If they outed you, you lost your job. And this happened to her. And 35 years later, she walked into her CCRC, and there in the living room as a client was the woman who did it to her. So you just never know. And in these situations where there's bullying in a general population of a facility, it is always the LGBTQ person who gets removed, not the bully.
Yeah, I got really emotional. And I apologize, but I just am really, as a straight person, every time when topics are brought up, I stop and I go into a place in myself and in my brain, and I think, did I wake up today worried about these things today? Were those on those weren't on my agenda. And I don't know how often, and maybe that's part of how we find a way to bring people together a little bit, is, did you wake up this morning and think about these kinds of issues? Because if you didn't, that is privilege. That's a form of it. And I didn't wake up today to do that. And it really bothers me to know that there's a potentially a long history there for so many of us to have not recognized the need. Had just been going about our day, right? And there's a need there for people who really, really are dependent on us to find better answers for them. And I become very passionate about getting to those goals, as some of the people who know me are on this call very well. And that's one of them, is that I don't know if I would know what my sister is married to a woman, and I say to my sister all the time, like, I don't know what the things are that you need. You need to tell me. I'll go get them. I will do them, but I don't necessarily know. And I think that's what you were talking about, Joy. Like, am I a caregiver? Am I an ally? Because that's a verb. It's always going to be an activity, a verb. It's never going to be natural to me in my situation, to know that, but I want it for her. And that's why what you're doing, Paul, is so important, because you're setting up the system to be able to teach us to look out for these things. It's really put a new light on a lot of areas, and I'm just really grateful. And I think what you're doing, if we can replicate that over states and areas and communities, whatever that might look like, or to be looking for, that's why I wanted to have this webinar today. I think it's really important. I know we talked about Alzheimer's, and that's a doozy. I tell everybody, I never want that for myself. Out of all the things that are out there, I love being able to look at, like Peggy has, like on the call right now, know so many things about her and her wife, and they raise dogs, and where she lives, and all these things. I want to know people. To not be able to know those is really scary. When my father had dementia, he described it as, I'll never forget, we were on a ferry. I had taken him apple picking. He forgot where we were, and he was very frightened. And so we got in the car, and I was like, and he kept rubbing the tops of his legs and rocking. And he says, I never want this for you. And he said, he's like, it's like people are taking things out of they're just gone. And he goes, and I know they used to be there, and I'm trying to think it through, but it's gone. In the LGBTQ space, specific to Alzheimer's, dementia, okay, depending on, can we talk through some of the things to look for that might be different than because one of the things that you made a comment, I think it was, Joy, that you may not even know the partner. Maybe they're not out, and they haven't said, I know Peggy's brought this up at Unity before. What are some of the things that we can start looking for in that space? Either one of you to answer, because I'm really kind of curious.
I mean, it's a really great question, because a lot of these folks have been maintaining double identities their whole lives. So how does that impact when dementia starts?
Exactly.
You know,
Right. So that for caregivers of all kinds, the necessity, the critical necessity to find LGBTQ plus resources early on is imperative. We always talk about make sure you have everything in order. Now, that message, I think, is embedded in all of our heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now when we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, we got to add another layer. And it has to be one of safety and inclusiveness. And we need to plan far more in advance than ever before. Now, there are a lot of resources that are available, but they cost a lot of money. So the reason I was so excited about Paul to be here with us today is because he has so much to share. In fact, Paul and I talked briefly a couple of weeks ago about an Alzheimer's initiative that we're working on, and we're going to get back together and talk about that soon.
Yeah, let me know how we can help on that.
Yeah.
we actually have news on that. So
Yay.
I've become a dementia champion, which is basically just giving trainings to people about how to understand the difference between dementia and aging, signs when they happen, and how to make people more comfortable in whatever world they're in, if you're realizing that they have dementia. And then people can go to this website and take a quiz and make a pledge to do, there's like 5 different things that they can do to become a dementia friend. And it's a very low tech, low touch way of just getting more people cognizant of it and less afraid. I mean, the part of the problem is that people just freak out when someone starts having dementia. They don't know how to deal with it. And
okay. So I'm going to tell on myself on this one. Remember that apple picking place that we went to? The very first thing that happened, I went to my physician. I had just happened to have a physical that day, that week. And I had said to Jason, who my neighbor, my friend, and I said, yeah, I took dad. He asked me, how's dad doing? I said, I took him apple picking. He's like, how'd it go? And I said, he freaked out. He's, yeah, you need to, I know you're trying to do the right thing because you're trying to do things with him, because it's probably the last couple of times you're going to be able to do it. It's very terrifying for him. If you can do things in his comfort zone, or if you're going to take him someplace, play music that he knows, because that will be calming. But trying to take them out of their comfort zone of where they do know well is going to not fare well for all of you. And that's exactly, in fact, what had happened. So I learned something from that, but I think that it's a really interesting time frame when you talk about like the layers, Joy, like the onion of peeling back the things that are on there. I want to make certain I make a comment here in Zoom that and I hope I'm saying Adrian right. Is that right, Adrian?
Yeah, it's Adrian.
Okay, thank you. It's a huge barrier and challenge when attempting to find a long-term care or an in-home health that has an LGBTQ component to it, or that are competent to it. My husband's a physical therapist. He works in rehab centers and nursing homes. And I started asking him this question, anticipating our call today. He started actually inquiring. Remember, I live in rural Missouri. He started actually inquiring and asking, like, what happens? And it was interesting to watching healthcare representatives look at him go, I don't know. I don't know. So that's their job to have an answer, right? And they don't have an answer to it. So his just asking is a big deal, because it also puts a stigma on him of he is an ally. And sometimes they don't like that in rural Missouri. Gail, who I love and adore, who's in this long-term care space, she says, we see a high percentage of those insured for long-term care insurance who are gay couples. The village is different, as you have pointed out. Earlier years, we could not have offered marital discounts. So there's one thing, is that they wouldn't get necessarily the marital discount for their long-term care insurance in the past. and that was a navigation financially for that kind of stuff too. And then, and dementia comes in stages, which she's right too. I just want to make sure we see those comments in there because it's valid. Because it's not like dementia is not like a, textbook, right? It's because I thought it was just aging. Oh, my dad's just getting old. It was in fact not,
No,
and
especially with early onset Alzheimer's showing up in the workplace with people as young as 30 years old.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Peggy, you've got a question. You get your hand raised.
I do. It's actually a statement. Hi, Paul. Good to see you. Enjoy my favorite people.
Hey, I'm here.
I know you're here. No, but in terms of my resources, and this is one of the things that is that sharing of resources, because we even have to go even before the dementia sets in. It's just like routine health issues that our members of our community have to deal with. And now with the current rhetoric that you're hearing. Just the other day, I had a client who had to go in for a routine checkup, and the health provider said that, no, I'm not going to treat you because you chose your gender identity. So you should not have to get that treatment. And that doesn't just happen in the middle of the country where they're passing all these laws. That actually happened in Seattle here. So there are organizations doing the work all across the country, and this is where we're forging these relationships so that these seniors don't fall into the cracks or through the cracks, and are getting the resources and the providers that can help them just even to do the simple things, because it gets to a point where if you have to fight these battles all the time, they just don't do it.
Yeah.
No, we have a veterans project. We got a grant from New York Community Trust to house 14 LGBTQ older adult veterans in wraparound services. And we constantly had to pivot. One of the first things that happened was we were going to be limiting it to folks who had service-connected disability because they have the ability to pay. That it's a determination made by the VA, and it can result how much of your disability is related to your service, and it can be between $300 and $3,000 a month on top of your Social Security and whatever pensions you have. And what a surprise! LGBTQ veterans have not applied because they don't trust the system, so they're leaving all this money on the table that's meant for them. But who can blame them?
I can't either. Talk about that a little bit more in depth about the veteran aspect of this when it comes to LGBTQ and aging and caregiving and such, because I'm thinking about like benefits when they go to claim and stuff. That can be
that's the point.
Yeah, the hairy, scary time.
Yeah. And I had this 74-year-old Vietnam veteran. And when I said, do you have a service-connected benefit? He said, I'm no hero. He was on the ground during the Tet Offensive. He is absolutely qualified. And so, that now is one of the main services we're offering, which we hadn't anticipated before. So a lot of it is pivoting because you never really know what the nuances are until you get into those subpopulations. We have a really interesting thing with caregiving with LGBTQ caregivers, a dynamic where when there's a family with several siblings, often the LGBTQ sibling will be volunteered to take care of the parents because they don't have their own kids and family. And then they have to go back in the closet to be able to care for their parents because it would kill their parents if they knew. Yeah. And that's just insane.
It really is. I know that there's some comments here. I want to make sure I mention Adrienne. She's brought up some really good points in here. Another reason to support telehealth, which I really believe in, telehealth for a variety of reasons, not only just for LGBTQ, but for working parents, for people who have anxiety about being and traveling and going places like it. You could be getting there, and it's just getting there is the problem, right? So I'm a huge proponent of telehealth, and so is my physician, by the way. He thinks that most physicians are not making the best use of that space, and he does a really good job of it. So go Jason Van Gundy. She said also, FYI, all veterans dismissed from service under DADT can now apply for the veterans benefits. So that's good to know. I've got quite a few. She put, of course, and you're on it. She's got the link. Everything's on here. I love this. This makes it so easy. And that I think Gail said on here, AI is genderless and designed to support cognitive functioning for the individual. Okay. And you know, I think there's a lot of things on this space that when you talk about the resources, one thing I want to make certain I say to Peggy for Unity, I want to have some resources on our Unity page at Females in Finance. Katie's nodding her head yes, so that we have things on there so that it's public facing people. We're doing what we say we're going to do, which is supporting the human being part so they can do the human doing work that they do. And that's really important to me. So if there's any resources, Joy, from your book and such, Paul, from your organization, I want to make sure we put them on that page. So remind me, because I get busy.
Paul, it would be great for everybody to know what you're doing for the veterans at Stonewall. It's an amazing program you're doing.
Well, we've been pivoting a lot. We're actually in a crunch right now because we originally were going to do home sharing in the Bronx, and the emergency housing vouchers from the COVID bills flooded the market with 7,000 extra vouchers that are all market rate, and all of New York City region is 1 AMI. So they're flooding the Bronx with market rate vouchers. So speculators went in and basically offered 1 and 2 family homeowners 150% of their value of their houses in cash, and many people, and kind of wiped out the market that we were going to try and operate in. So we've pivoted, and now we have and a lot of, you know, you're always looking for affinity because the things we learned immediately, nonprofits that are contracted to serve veterans will do everything you ask them to do and be very responsive. VA employees, not really interested in extra work for the most part. And you learn these things. So right now we have a woman who has taken a net lease on a brand new building in Queens, and is making 40 units available to us. Her husband was a veteran who couldn't get connected to services and committed suicide. So she's very down with the cause. And so we have 40 units, first dibs to fill with veterans with federal subsidy vouchers.
Yeah. Can I ask a question on that really quick? Let's say I want to pretend like I don't know anything about Paul or your company. I'm moving to Brooklyn, and how do people research and find resources like, because this is the thing. If this is great, I want to teach people how to be resourceful to look those things up, because I don't know if I'd necessarily know the right words or the right whatever. And I think, does that make sense, Joy? I mean, I know that's why your book is so fabulous, because I told you, I've got your book over here and it's got like 75 tabs where I've put notes on it, you know, and that's why I highly recommend, not just because Joy's my friend, highly recommend, if you have not read her book, this is your sign, go order it, because it is amazing. You don't have to read it cover to cover. You can take chapters and apply them to what you're doing. But I think being resourceful is important, but how do you find the resource? Does that, I guess, maybe narrows the question down.
I got to jump in and say, what stops people from getting resources in terms of talking to other people? I mean,
I can tell you a few things. Hold on. I can answer a few of this.
Yeah.
We went through this at Females in Finance. So we went through this at Females in Finance because, and you were on the Sip and Savor, but I think Peggy might have been, or definitely Katie was, where there was a question when somebody said, and I'm not going to say this person's name, I don't know what all of the different terms means. And she got very emotional, started crying because she felt bad about that. And Katie, do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I actually reached out to her privately and offered to clarify anything she had questions on.
Okay.
But yes,
but this is a really important, I want to
Yeah.
hold on one second, because I want to finish it. Then I want you to piggyback onto it.
Yeah.
If we don't have safe spaces, Females in Finance is a safe space. I'm not, join my organization or don't. I want you to find where your home is. But you got to have a safe space to ask the question that you don't know the answer to, and that people aren't going to come and attack you for, oh, you didn't say it right this way, or you didn't do that. If the intention is valid, the question's valid. And then that question that person asked in that particular meeting, Katie, that you followed up on, thank you very much for doing that. She got very emotional because she was afraid people were going to judge her for not having the right answer, the right way to say it. And we've got to start allowing people to make mistakes, to trip over the speed bump and then correct themselves later on, because it's really hard to ask the question, like, to Joy, to your point, like, I'm not looking for the resource because I don't know if the way I'm going to ask the
Right.
question is going to be
Right.
okay.
So that's the job of us professionals. So we bring it up. You know, are you concerned about any LGBTQ people in your family? Is it a subject that you need to talk about? Even if they don't bring it up, what stops us from bringing it up? That's
And-
my
and
point.
Yeah.
There are other things. I sit on the New York State Commission for the Blind's LGBTQ resource group. And they said, you know, if you introduce yourself with your pronouns, the blind person who cannot see the rainbow flag on your desk understands immediately that it's a safe space.
Correct.
Yeah. Katie, you
And-
had a question, I think, too.
Well, I do have a question, but also just to follow up on what Cheryl was saying, the other good thing about that sip and savor conversation was I was able to explain the LGBTQ perspective of that situation, where there's a level of exhaustion and frustration and defensiveness because of the climate and just overall exhaustion of being the person who has to teach. So we did have a really positive discussion about how to show that you're an ally, and one of the big things was pronouns. So that when you do then ask that question, if you use the wrong words, the person who you're asking knows that wasn't your intention. And the other thing was, we had a good conversation about asking the person who's part of the community who could answer that question, if they're in a mental and emotional place to answer that question for you, or if they're not, who could you reach out to? So that was one of my favorite sip and savor conversations, because I feel like it did a beautiful job of showing both sides of why that becomes a confrontational situation when it really didn't mean to be. My follow-up question is, Paul, do I understand correctly? So one of the things that you're working on with LGBTQ elder care is getting more people in the community into being a caregiver by offering LGBTQ people who don't have other job opportunities training and higher compensation than what they would have gotten elsewhere. Did I understand that right?
Correct.
That's
and
brilliant.
a chance, if they stay long enough, to vest shares in the equity that the property portfolio is
That's
generating.
absolutely incredible. What a brilliant way to handle that. So
Yeah, it's
props.
getting
I'd love to know how to support that.
Well, financial planners. So one of our strategies has been cross-sector conversations about every idea that's generated. So in 2020, we did a two-day event called the Innovation Hub. It was all online, and it ended up raising $19,000, which we weren't planning to do. But it was 5 housing workshops and 5 health workshops. Somebody would come to us, an expert, with an idea, an innovative idea, and then pitch it for 6 minutes, and then have a 22-minute fishbowl discussion with their experts that they brought in front of the audience. We had 138 people attend the session. So TD Bank did one on land banks. The veterans housing idea was one of them, and the council member's chief of staff participated on that panel, and then that council member ended up being the speaker of the council. And that, in fact, her district is where this building is happening. So we then created an Innovation Hub platform where the information could be archived, and anyone who was interested in joining the discussion could access that and catch up. And now we have working groups. And then TD Bank actually was so excited by the Stonewall Bridge idea that in July of 21, they did 3 public roundtables with their networks and brought us all of these professionals. So we have commercial, nonprofit, government, and end users, both straight and gay, engaged in the development of these projects. So Stonewall Bridge now has the whole care protocol is done. The very complicated vetting process, which is so far above and beyond any other home care group we've talked to. And so we and now the community property portfolios, we actually have I spoke in front of UBS and Goldman Sachs's LGBTQ employee resource groups at their Pride event. And so they're in helping us format a case study that another group of legacy planners and tax specialists is going to take on as an exercise. So it's really like the more people we engage in this, the more knowledgeable the entire industry becomes about what the issues and challenges, not only the issues and challenges, but it's really important to focus on the idea of a community vision. You know, this is from the community, and part of it is trusting ourselves enough to self-actualize.
Yeah.
So the newest project we're working on is going to be in the Hudson Valley. We're working with ArtSpace, which has built artist live work buildings around the country, to create an artist live work retirement community for LGBTQ senior artists and their allies that has a high-end spa that will drive revenue and be available to our folks 1 day a week exclusively. And then also to have a working laboratory on arts and dementia as a revenue generator, as employment for the folks who are still interested in working in that retirement community, and as a resource for folks who live in the community who start to need it.
I want Joy for you to start bringing us home on caregiving in this aspect too. I think this is a really important topic as well. We can't do the work we do without considering caregivers in this.
Well, this is, I think this comes before anything else, because if we don't have the support, then what do we got, right?
Mhm.
Now, I come from that point of view where we all need each other. And one of the things that I am a fierce advocate about is the one about you never know when you're going to need help and who lives next door or who is in your immediate vicinity that you now know don't pay any attention to, but you would if you were stuck in an elevator with this person and, you know, it was going down. You would become immediate good friends, right?
Mhm.
We have so few professional caregivers. Not only that, but nobody can afford them anyway, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I absolutely encourage everybody to get to know is Paul's idea about caregivers living with the LGBTQ elders, so that there is a shared resource there. I need a roof over my head. You need my strong muscles, right? So it's straight and gay caregivers working with the elders, and there are so many advantages to that. But so many people, now this is the other side of the coin, and that is when there is a need for healthcare, and then the caregiver has to go out and figure out, how in the world am I going to be able to tell whether my elder is going to be safe or not? And we can ask all the questions in the world, and if they want to get into our pocketbooks, they may say, yeah, absolutely, everything will be fine with your elder living here. But we really have to dig deeper. We have to look at policies, written policies. You know, what do they say on their admissions? Is it in writing? I ask, how many LGBTQ plus individuals work at your company? And then, has the staff gone through any kind of training? Now, we could have the best environment in the world and have our elders, our LGBTQ plus elders in an environment, but that still doesn't solve the problem, because what do we do when the residents won't comply?
Yeah.
What do we do when they're bullying?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
And so this is now, I say, and this is what I have done in the past, this is when I put on a mindset of being an educator and an agent rather than get angry,
Mm-hmm.
which I can do so well. So what I mean by that is, when someone is living in this environment, they need to have a teacher's mindset. Would inviting all of the residents to participate in an LGBTQ plus activity, a movie, a pride festival, a parade, a lecture. Those are always good. And create an LGBTQ plus resident-led program within a housing environment. Doesn't have to be an assisted living or a nursing home. It could be any place where people live together and you have someone in the living environment who just doesn't get it and doesn't want to get it. So I'm constantly trying to bridge attitudes. It's part of my job as an advocate. So the caregivers, more than the elders, I think the caregivers are more challenged.
Yeah, I was going to say that was, I read you and I know this. I've read a book by that Ai-jen Poo, who, caregivers across America. If you've not read her book, highly recommend it. She starts off and she talks about the epidemic of caregiving, like where it's at. People are burned out. They're tired. Mostly falls on the shoulders of women. And then the sandwich generation in particular is having a really rough time. One of the things I found was really interesting was what I quoted in the chat box about the AARP study from 2020. I actually did some homework because that's when the last big study, and I trust them because they're knowledgeable space in this, what they're doing, but nearly 1 in 5, so 20% are providing unpaid care to an adult with a health or functional need. So 20% of the people you meet in a day, in a lifetime, likely are doing some form of caregiving in that space. But the thing that really got me on their particular report was more Americans are caring for more than one person, up from 2015 from 18% to 24%. So we can see where the numbers are going. And Ai-jen Poo wrote a book 10, 15, 12 years ago, and she had already predicted this. She had already predicted all of it in her book, and that more family caregivers, 26%, are having difficulty coordinating, which is up from 19% just in 2025. It's 2015. It's all going up. And so we know we have a caregiving dilemma, and we know that people are going to need caregivers. I'm likely going to need a caregiver. My husband's it is very likely. What are we doing to do that? And what are we doing to make sure that that is equitable, that is inclusive for everyone to get that same level of quality care? Because I assure you, when I look at the ads from some very large long-term care insurance companies and others, not what do you ever see ads that's for the LGBTQ person? I went back and I looked. I actually took the time and was thumbing through and looking at their pages.
So on Stonewall Village NYC, there are listings, and every business that's listed there has a competency accreditation. There are several different kinds. Still, that's no guarantee that because Visiting Nurses of New York went through and got the certification for all of their folks, that someone who's newly hired, or that it happens, that they're refreshed each year, that they're keeping up with the changes.
Yep.
And so we are actually starting a Yelp-like feature on Stonewall NYC where folks will be able to recommend people from our lists.
We almost need an Angie's list of this stuff. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but we kind of do.
Yeah.
No, that's where we're trying to get to with this.
Got
it's
it.
Courser.
And I really appreciate the fact that Andrew brought up the fact about the cultural component to it. Ai-jen Poo addresses that in her book because she is from a mindset where they got the stigma in Asian cultures in general is that you don't put anybody in a home. You're taking care of those elderly people till that's just the way it is. And when my very first marriage, I was married to somebody from Iran, and his mother became very hard to take care of. And he kept looking to me to do it while I was raising 5 kids, working a job. I'm commuting in the Bay Area. There's no time. So I did opt to put her into, it was blasphemous what I did. And she's right. Most of those are highly religious, and LGBTQ is, stigmatized in that space. I get it. We already get it now, and I'm sorry to get political on this call, but I can't. How can you talk about this and not? We've got people here who are like, oh, I can't serve you because it's against my whatever. And it's like, are you for real? We're talking about what happened to health. I mean, I thought healthcare was supposed to be for everyone, not just it just drives me fruit. So I just
Well,
think we do have so much work to do in this space.
as
Oh,
as the
It's
long
an
term,
understatement.
yeah, as the long care
Oh.
system collapses,
Right.
the
Yeah.
need is doubling, then everything becomes competitive, and you can eliminate people from eligibility for all different sorts of reasons and make sure the resources are coming to you. I want to say that. I also want to say, when we first started this, we would go to groups and say, we want to be your LGBTQ service providers, advisors, and they would say, well, we're for everyone. So
Yeah.
and then the response is,
Those are the same people who say I don't see color.
exactly. And then you take it to, what are the protocols if a tenant picks on another tenant?
Mhm.
What is your operating protocol? And they don't have one.
Yeah.
So people think that they are there, and they're just not.
Yeah. I know that personally, I can only look at my home environment. And I know that very recently, in fact, my husband called me from work, and they had a gentleman who came in to assisted living, and he is HIV positive. And a lot of people didn't want to work with him. Like, it was like, I'm not. And Daryl's like, oh my God, we're back in the 80s again. This is not how you get it. I can go people need to put your hand, and then he's physical therapy. Physical is the operative word of that. He's like, I'll take care of him. So he went in every day to do the therapy he needed with this gentleman every day. And people are like, kept asking. It was interesting to watch him say, people would say, aren't you concerned about what? What are you concerned about? He needs care. I'm a healthcare provider. I took an oath of ethics that I was going to serve every single person. And you know what? Do you not know how you get this? This is not how this works. And so it was a really interesting, he would come home, and it's until I think a lot of times it happens to people where it's in their frame, but their vision, their field of vision. It's easy to walk by and it's not my problem. I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to, but that's just not how we solve problems. We have to get in there and educate ourselves. I would think that one of the things that I made a commitment with after I moved, so don't hold me to this week, because we got movers, friends. Don't ask me if I did this by Friday, okay? But I am going to commit to looking into the St. Louis Metro LGBTQ, like whether it's our Better Business, whatever those are that bring businesses together, to see how I can be more understanding and helpful, and what the resources are in our local area. But again, I'm going to go back to Peggy, who's our executive advisor of Unity at Females in Finance, and make certain we have resources. So if you have resources, Adrienne, this is you. I'm talking to you because there's 600 links in this. Okay. Let me know. Send me an email, Cheryl@femalesandfinance.com. I will make certain that we have things in there on a resource level. And Katie and Peggy know me very well, and so does Joy. I could do what I say. My say-do is very high. But I do think that we need to have those and start putting them together. Not that I'm going to be Angie's list, because I'm not, but I do think we need to have some place we can start to, click the button of start learning of what can I do to be a better ally of this space.
You also probably, the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce is a really good resource, and you probably have at least a regional chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the Dementia Friendly City initiative. Now, I will tell you, it's in its infancy. It's not doing what I would hope it would do. It's out there, though. Just to have it say Dementia Friendly City, I've been going into the actual websites and taking a look and asking questions and trying to up the ante on these organizations, because at least they exist. I'm delighted that they even went so far as to say, okay, which cities want to do this, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
If you live in any of the dementia friendly cities, I would contact who's in charge of that and ask them to explain it, and then maybe we can make their initiatives like real, because they've already got the memo that dementia friendly is a good idea. Now, can we add some more about LGBTQ and everything else?
Yeah. Shout out to
Right?
Peggy, who already got me the link to the, she's already taking
Nice.
care of it.
Great.
She is great. Okay, we're going to be wrapping up. Any questions for our subject matter experts here today? This is your time. And if not, you can follow up privately because they are both very accessible, wonderful human beings who love to answer questions on this topic. I want to make certain. Peggy, any wrapping thoughts as our advisor to Unity as well?
I would like you to tell everybody what Unity is because
Okay.
they may
Okay.
not know.
Go
Yeah.
for it, Peggy. That's
Okay, well, Unity is our group of financial professionals who are in the space of working with and doing this, creating conversations that help LGBTQ professionals like myself and Katie, as well as our clients, have resources so that we can build successful practices. And then this is one of the closing point that I had is, and I've had this conversation, I had a long conversation with the cancer group recently and talking about the extra layer of cancer diagnosis for LGBT community. So I'm going to be working with them on that, but it's this chosen family idea. We need resources all over the country. And it's so cool when you find somebody like Adriana's in Maryland. It's like the Maryland area, Washington, DC area, having people on all coasts. I can't tell you how many times I've shot an email to Joy saying, hey, Joy, I've got clients in here who are having this and they need help. Who do you know? So it's the whole idea is pulling together these resources because we're often siloed. We're often put in a scenario where they really don't want us to know who the resources are because they want us to pull the business through the normal, good old boys network, which is unfortunately alive and well in the financial service industry.
Yeah. So
this is how we do this. It's having the community. We have what Paul's doing on the East Coast, we're doing on the West Coast in Seattle and Gen Pride and a lot of the work we do there. And there's a lot of cross-referencing. The whole survey that was done.
Yeah.
I noticed you the Joy and Paul, you tried to loop in Karen on that one, who's our expert here in Seattle on aging and long-term care for LGBTQ. So that's really one of the thing is share resources, share links, have conversations. Let's bring
Ask
this.
questions.
Ask questions. Yep. And
the question that's in the back of your head that you want to know, but you don't think it's going to sound right. That's the one to ask. It's literally the one. I guarantee it. Katie, I want you to add some color to this too, because as a younger person in the space and you've been really involved, I'd like to hear any closing thoughts you have.
Well, that's why I was really, really excited about the job component of that, because one of the things I see a lot, I've now been almost weekly volunteering at a local youth group. And I specifically work with a group called Queer Adulting. So they're about to transition out into the adult world. And I love it because I run in and I'm like, here's all the things someone should have told me at your age, so I could have avoided all these expensive mistakes. So I bring the financial component, but it's become more of just like a life skills situation. And I really have gotten close to a lot of the kids, but one of the hardest things is jobs and getting employed, because not only are a lot of them genderqueer or just, they present very much a part of the community, and it makes it very hard for them to get a job. And then add to that any sort of trauma or neurodiversity that comes from being so visibly part of the community. Getting a job is next to impossible. Luckily, there's a lot of wonderful organizations in our area who have hired so that they can get these job experiences, but this is going to be a challenge for the rest of their life.
Katie, where are you located?
I'm located just north of Boston, and this organization is in Salem, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Hey, Gail, do you want to come on and ask some questions or give some thoughts? Because I also feel like this is your big time cup of tea.
Yeah, well, I think it still comes down very much to education and money. Care is going to cost money, whether it's going to come from Medicaid. One of the chat comments was about Medicaid. being reduced. It's always been an issue, and people end up living in skilled nursing, whether they're straight or gay, because that's what pays the bill is the states. And that's a shame. There are many people living in skilled nursing that could be at home. They could be in assisted living. They could be in memory units, but the money isn't there. So I think in all of this, we can't forget, where is the money going to come from to pay for this? And I think the other piece is the training. I mean, having worked in nursing homes for 14 years before I segued into insurance, I spent all my time training the CNAs and the staff how to house money, how to communicate. So I think that we can't give short shrift to that, and where the funding is going to come and the training. And I wouldn't forget also the employer. People are still working, and I think the employers have a huge opportunity and responsibility, and frankly, incentive to educate people, to bring programs in so they're not losing their employees, whether it's their concentration or physically, who are doing caregivers, regardless of their situation being single, straight, gay. So I kind of look at this globally, and thank goodness on the insurance side, we don't have to deal like I did 12, 15 years ago of not being able to give the same benefits to a couple, say if it is a gay couple, a domestic couple, that I couldn't do the same thing as a heterosexual married couple. So, we're making some strides, but unfortunately, I think it still comes down as a therapist, as an insurance person, education, money, legislation. So it's on all fronts.
Yeah. So Adrienne, you had some questions in here. Do you want to ask? You want me to ask for you?
My question?
No.
Oh,
I was just wondering because, I'm a certified mediator and arbitrator also. I'm a nurse. And, who's the resource in long-term care? It's ombudsman is the first person I ask families, have you contacted the ombudsman? But then, having been part of an ombudsman program in California, I don't believe there's any training. I'm just wondering, like, what is that orientation, or what do they get, right? And is there any kind of national, I've never seen anything, but is there any education for them? But I think that this is something really important. I really encourage all of you to make content, get on social media. This should be on YouTube. There's like 5,000 people.
I commit. I will put this on YouTube.
Yeah. So do it. Put it on YouTube. Yeah. And it's all about hashtags. And, there's so many like nursing students, social work students, like we need to get this information out because we're all connectors and multipliers for this information and to get younger people really involved as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
We got about a minute and a half. So Joy, Paul, bring us home.
Thank you for having this, Cheryl. You recognized the month of June and you decided to pull us out of there and make it its own special event. So thank you.
Absolutely. I didn't want to just stuff it into.
I know. It would have gotten lost.
Yeah. I didn't want that.
Thank you.
This is too important. Way too important. Paul, any final thoughts?
Anyone who's interested in talking to us further about, growing your practice with our folks, I'm available.
Could you put your website in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. While he's doing that, I'm going to put a final little seal on this. One, if you're interested in being a part of something really, really special, please join Females in Finance in a formal way that you can help us make change happen. I mean, yes, we're focused in the financial services and financial technology space. However, the financial planners that we support, this kind of stuff is really, really critical to them doing their business well. And so we need to push outside of just the straight and narrow on things and go out and see the full color of what's available to us to serve communities well. Secondly, too, if you have questions, we'll make certain that contact information for Joy, Paul, yes, me too, but will be on our public Facebook page for Females in Finance. I will put this on YouTube and make certain we have it there. And we'll recirculate this out, especially to those who and ask questions, even if it's after this. The conversation doesn't just stop because the clock stops here in a moment. It continues. And so we want to make certain that we're open to that. And with it, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about a topic that's very passionate to me and many others, as you can tell. And I will see many of you, hopefully all of you, on another call. Thank
And
you.
have a
Ken.
happy move.
Oh, don't even. I'll take that
Bye,
into
everybody.
consideration.
Thank
Bye,
you.
friends. Take care of
Bye-bye.
Thank you
yourselves.
so much. This was awesome.
Absolutely.